Tariq descended the rusted ladder into the abandoned tunnel, the air thick with damp and silence, like the city had buried something it didn't want found. His radio hissed with static before cutting out completely, replaced by a low murmur, like voices arguing just beyond the reach of his flashlight. He froze, heart thudding in his ears as the whispering grew louder, circling him like fog in a graveyard. Must be the pipes, he muttered to himself, but his voice sounded too loud, too alone. He turned and saw chalk markings on the wall, fresh, strange symbols swirling like spirals and teeth, ones he knew weren't there before. Each line was drawn with trembling precision, as if by someone desperate or possessed. The whispering shifted, now calling his name, soft, childlike, and coming from behind the sealed maintenance door no one had opened in years. He backed away slowly, but the ground seemed to pulse under his boots, and the lights above him flickered like blinking eyes. Tariq dropped his bag and turned to run, but the tunnel behind him was different. Longer, darker, unfamiliar. Security footage would later show him whispering something and walking calmly into the shadows, never returning. The only thing found was his flashlight, still on, illuminating chalk symbols arranged in a spiral too perfect to be human. Detectives dismissed it as stress. His co-workers wouldn't speak of what they heard in the radio static that night. Urban archaeologist Dr. Elin Ross studied the symbols days later and found her ears ringing after touching one, like she'd been underwater too long. Unseen by the camera, chalk dust stirred behind her, rising into the air like breath. And down in the tunnel, something old and patient whispered again, now louder, because someone had finally heard it. Dr. Elin Ross stepped into the yawning mouth of the tunnel, her boots echoing on damp concrete, swallowed instantly by the dark. The city had called her in to assess unusual markings, but the silence felt too heavy for archaeology. It felt personal. Her flashlight beam caught the chalk symbols lining the walls, some jagged like claws, others smooth as if drawn with reverence. They weren't graffiti. They were ritualistic, intentional, and far too symmetrical for panicked scribbling. She clicked on her audio recorder, speaking calmly into the device, though her voice sounded foreign, distant in the stale air. Something about the tunnel felt off, as if it didn't want to be walked through, but tolerated her for now. Further in, her breath came in clouds, though it wasn't cold, only wet and stale, like the breath of a tomb. She paused, hearing the faintest echo of her own words, but then another voice answered softly. Not hers, not human. She turned, shining her light back, but the tunnel behind her was silent and empty. No airflow, no vermin, no signs of life. Later, replaying the audio in her office, she heard it clearly. A low voice whispering her name between her sentences. She stopped breathing for a moment when she realized the voice repeated exactly what Tariq had said before vanishing. It's not alone anymore. That night, unable to sleep, Elin traced the spiral markings she'd photographed. Her dreams were thick with static and stone, and something watching her from inside the spiral. When she awoke, her fingers were stained with white dust, and her recorder was playing, though she hadn't touched it. On the tape, something whispered again, clearer this time. You brought me back. It began with scattered reports. A barista who dreamed of drowning in stone. An office worker who couldn't stop hearing his dead sister's voice behind elevator doors. A woman on the subway tore out her earbuds and screamed that someone was whispering inside her music. Children woke up crying, saying the walls had mouths, the facade that the man underground was trying to crawl into their heads. Hospitals quietly noted a surge in insomnia, sleepwalking, and sudden onset paranoia. But no one made the connection at first. People described the same shadowy figure in their dreams. Faceless, yet watching, standing in spirals of stone and ash. Radio frequencies began to bleed, and late-night callers whispered secrets they couldn't have known. Some in ancient languages, some in voices not their own. A man threw himself from his balcony, clutching a notebook filled with spirals and the phrase, "Not thoughts, invasions," scrawled over and over. Every therapist in the city began hearing nearly identical confessions. "There's something in my head, and I think it's learning." The whispers didn't just come at night anymore. They came in static, in wind, in silence. A priest interrupted Sunday Mass mid-sermon to laugh, whispering that God had been replaced and it was his turn now. Even Elin, detached and rational, began to forget words mid-sentence, replacing them with symbols she hadn't studied. The city felt heavier, slower, like time was pooling thick in corners and draining downward. Streetlights flickered in sync, like breathing, and always just before someone heard a voice call their name. The spirals started appearing on buildings, drawn in ash, etched in glass, burned into wooden doorways overnight. No one knew it yet, but the city wasn't sick. It was waking up. Detective Hart was assigned to what initially seemed like unrelated cases. Sudden violent outbursts, deaths from sleepwalking into traffic, and cryptic spiral graffiti tagged across rooftops and underpasses. But she began mapping them out and noticed they aligned with now defunct subway lines, all pointing toward long-sealed maintenance sectors. Victims all shared proximity to these zones that no longer appeared on official maps. Elin reached out after reading one of Hart's reports, recognizing one of the symbols as matching a sigil from a sunken city, once theorized to exist beneath this region. Together, they unearthed historical records, accounts of dreams, disappearances, and worship near subterranean chambers long since buried. The deeper they dug, the louder the voices became. Whispers turned to commands. Strange gatherings occurred in basements and storm drains. Some people were already kneeling. Elin found references to a godlike creature, many-eyed, many-mouthed, entombed beneath the city to stop its influence from spreading. But the spiral carving showed cracks forming in the seal. Descending into the tunnels together, Hart and Elin found the heart of the old network. A massive stone chamber covered in carvings of spirals and mouths. In its center stood an obsidian monolith, splitting slowly, glowing faintly from within. Carvings turned toward them as if watching. The voices screamed now, not into their ears but into their thoughts. Hart staggered, gripping her head, fighting not to fall. Elin saw her eyes glaze over, then refocus. Hart whispered, "What's a vessel?" The seal could only be mended by absorbing the voices, by becoming their anchor. Hart stepped into the spiral on the floor, knees trembling. She turned to Elin, smiled faintly, and said, "You brought me here. I'll hold it. Get out." As she reached the center, the stone beneath her feet folded like paper, pulling her down as the monolith closed. The carvings fell silent. The whispers ceased. Elin stumbled from the tunnels, alone. The city was quiet. The city quieted as if waking from a fever dream. Sirens stopped wailing. Spiral graffiti faded beneath the new paint, and the subway slowly rumbled back to life. People began returning to their routines, unaware of the silence that now filled the space where the whispers had lived. No one remembered the spiral city, or the murals of eyes, or the synchronized humming that once echoed in the playgrounds. But Elin remembered. She sat alone in her apartment most nights, lights off, staring at a map with a single red pin marking the center of what no longer existed. Her dreams were filled with stone chambers and breathing walls, with Heart's eyes glowing like distant stars through the cracks. Therapists told her it was survivor's guilt. Sleep specialists blamed stress. But none of them could explain the faint traces of chalk she found under her nails each morning. The spiral wasn't gone. It had just stopped spinning. She visited the sealed entrance every week, now hidden behind construction fencing and a plaque that simply read, "Danger. Unstable ground." Each time she would place her hand on the earth and listen. And though she never heard anything, her heart beat slower there, like it remembered a rhythm her mind dared not recall. The city moved on, but something beneath it simply waited. One gray morning, as rain pattered on pavement, a boy walking to school paused beside a storm drain. The air smelled faintly of wet chalk. He tilted his head, blinked once, then leaned closer, as if hearing something call from below. His eyes widened, not in fear, but recognition. Inside the drain, darkness coiled like breath held too long, like a story not quite finished. A whisper rose, too faint for the wind to carry, curling around his ear like a secret meant only for him. The boy smiled, and then he whispered back,